and 1,000 neckbeardy points of light coding and so on to create this groundswell of open source that today is running almost all of the internet we know. So what's fascinating is this tension between the evolution and the revolution of getting stuff out there. So I'm going to hand things over to our moderator now, and you guys have a good conversation.
Thank you, Alistair. Yeah, you really can't see anybody here. My name is Shawn Freeman. I'm going to be moderating our Masters of the Openstack Universe panel with our fine panel here. I just want to kick it off with a quote on the quote theme here. And I think this quote fits this panel to a T. Those who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones that do. So that's you guys. I'm gonna let you all. So you're all crazy. I'm gonna let you all introduce yourselves. So we'll start with Mark at the end there.
Sure. So I'm Mark McLoughlin. I'm Technical Director for Openstack at RedHat. I'm from Ireland, if you can't tell from the accent. Heavily involved with Openstack for the last few years or so, contributed a lot to the project, but I've now kind of turned my focus internally to RedHat, kind of helping run our engineering team and working with customers and partners.
Hi, I'm Egle, and I'm a principal architect at Rackspace, even though I have a Texas accent, originally from Lithuania.
Chris Kemp, I think I introduced myself before. I'm one of the original folks who started the Openstack project. I'm on the board of directors, actually, with most of the people on the stage here. We're all on the Openstack board of directors as well. Good to be here.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Kathy Spence, and I am one of the monks who work in Intel IT. I'm a principal engineer, and my group is the IT hosting portfolio. We are an enterprise that we're using Openstack and Cloud Foundry together to deploy our enterprise private cloud.
Joshua McKenty. I worked with Chris at NASA some years ago, and having been hired originally to build a pass and then gotten distracted with this OpenStack thing for half a decade, I have recently gone back to the pass side. I'm now field CTO for Cloud Foundry at Pivotal.
Thank you guys. So as you can see, they're all crazy and really smart. So we're gonna kind of put them to the test here with a bunch of questions. We'll start off with who founded OpenStack?
We covered that yesterday. I think a lot of people deserve credit for the existence of OpenStack, and even more people deserve credit for why we're all talking about OpenStack today. And I think Josh and I were obviously there at the very beginning, but so were about 20 or 30 people that you'll never read about or hear about that made really significant contributions to the project. So, I'm more interested in talking about the people who are waking up every day, making contributions, fixing bugs, adding features, and contributing to the governance of the project. Josh?
Yeah, I think the users actually reinvent OpenStack every year. So I would say Catherine probably has done as much to create OpenStack as anyone else by running it and filing bugs with maybe a little less rage and a little more smile than some of the rest of us.
Well, so from our standpoint, Intel IT, we actually use the open source version of OpenStack, and so our contributions tend to be around that enterprise integration. How does it actually work with the rest of the enterprise?
I agree. Rackspace was one of the companies that helped found OpenStack, and we also run open source OpenStack installations, and it's incredible. Every time I go to OpenStack Summit, the community grows tremendously. Every time I see old and new faces, and people are really excited about OpenStack.
Yeah, personally, and RedHat, I came to the project maybe a year after it originally started, and I think the most remarkable thing about OpenStack is not just the size of it, but this constant evolution of the leadership of the project. It's like, people kind of shepherd the project for maybe a year or 2 years, but new leaders are constantly stepping up and helping move the project along, and it's a real kind of sign of the health of the project, the health of the community.
Great answers. So to follow on that question, and also on the previous speakers, kind of comment on vendor all-in bets. You have to bet on one vendor. How does OpenStack fix that?
I'll take a stab at that. I think that most enterprises that choose open source are choosing open source for two reasons, which are not the reasons we thought they were in the 90s or in the early 2000s. Prior to OpenStack, I also was the tech lead for Netscape for a couple of years, and so I've done open source in various forms for decades now. And most people that use open source do not contribute code. Like, so the whole myth of the patches welcome ecosystem, even with OpenStack, where we have tens of thousands of members of the foundation and thousands of contributing developers, we have millions of people impacted by using OpenStack. Most of them don't even know they're doing it. So those two things that people really like about open source, and I think OpenStack is a great epitome of this. One, you can buy the same binary bits from different vendors. And so it's not just that we believe that there's interop by virtue of some standards, there's interop by virtue of the same running code. And the second is, the nature of the open source community forces us to do agile development. And I don't think we knew that going in. I think it was a happy accident. But when you have thousands of folks trying to coordinate themselves, and you say, I'm going to work in private for 6 months or a year and create some giant piece of code, and then log in IRC and say, hey, Mark, will you review this? He'll get, that's like 8,000 lines of code. No, forget it. I'll get to it next year, maybe. But if you show up every week and you say, I have this idea, here's a small little incremental change, here's roughly what I'm going to do, it's 300 lines and there's some tests, that'll get reviewed and landed almost immediately. And that, we basically reinvented Agile as the only way we could coordinate a very large community. And that Agile community is what builds the innovation engine that folks look to open source to bring forward.
Take a quick swing at it. So putting it in very real terms, when you buy things to power your business, historically, vendors have tried to lock you in every way possible. And in recent times, with storage chassis and blade chassis and switch fabrics, the lock-in was in the products themselves. And so if you started to buy a bunch of blades from a particular vendor, well, guess what? You couldn't use blades from another vendor in that blade chassis. One of our investors, Andy Bechtelsheim, who founded Sun Microsystems, called this needless differentiation. So it's these features in these products that are completely needlessly differentiating them, but for the lock-in that they cause. And so OpenStack now provides a way for vendors to differentiate themselves because they have a product that maybe deploys in a more reliable scenario, or is more secure, or has a better support package, or might regionally operate a data center close to you, not because you had to build software that leverages the proprietary aspects of that hardware. It really lifts that layer up and makes it more of a business decision. So I see it from a government perspective. This was great because if we're going to spend all this money on one vendor, the last thing we want to do is have to spend money on that same vendor again, because the management tools, the processes, the training, the people, the tools are all focused on that one vendor's particular management tools or particular stuff we've already bought.
Yeah, the vendor lock-in aspect is one huge aspect of this. Like, you, as a consumer of open source, you want that assurance that you can move off that product, and I think that's largely about. It kind of ties in with the need for sustainability of your choice. Like, if you're choosing a technology, you want to know you can stick with that for a long time. So even if the vendor goes away, you're then looking at the health of the open source community behind that, and whether that community can carry on without that initial vendor that you've gone with. So kind of go together.
So actually, OpenStack is now working to help all the users that are using OpenStack with the lock-in. There is a project called DevCore, and what it does, it basically says if you're running OpenStack, these are the features and functionality that should be available there. Any given vendor may have additional features and functionality that they add on, and that's the lock-in part. But if you're just trying to run some simple compute or network or storage, you should be able to go from one vendor to another. Of course, in reality, it's never that simple, but OpenStack is trying to help with that.
Yeah, so in the enterprise, there's always, attention. There's a preference for products that you can count on, that have 5 nines of availability, that are, bulletproof, basically. And then there's, I think, areas where you want to take more leadership, where you want to have more risk-taking, where you want more innovation. And so open source communities are a great place, and Openstack is a great example, Cloud Foundry is a great example of where you can take more leadership for us as Intel. Obviously there's a great connection there from product standpoint, and we can be a great use case for how we lead in the company itself. And so, and having that opportunity to contribute to the community is great in terms of moving fast. And then, you do want to see where does it make sense? Where do things become more commoditized, where it makes more sense to have more of that product standpoint rather than, a community open source type of project.
Very cool. So I'll kind of lead into talking about enterprise specific and why they've adopted OpenStack. It's been said that they've cited the ability to innovate is why they went to OpenStack instead of something else. Do you want to just quickly talk to that?
So, well, why don't I start, because I kind of already started in my last answer for that too. But I think one of the things that we're really looking for from OpenStack is we do have that hybrid cloud vision. We do want to get to, we want to be able to burst. We do want to be able to think about right-sizing our infrastructure and provision more for typical rather than peak. We want to think about, where can we reduce that 5 nines of availability because we have more cloud-aware applications. Take advantage of cost, take advantage of, of utilizing data centers where maybe we don't have data centers, things like that. So, and OpenStack for us, we're looking at that to be kind of that de facto standard API set that's going to enable that. We've done a lot of work in the past year to take proprietary and open systems together in our own private cloud, and we're looking to extend that into the public cloud.
So at Rackspace, we've seen enterprises come to us and say, hey, we want to run most of our things on private cloud, but we want to have the ability to burst into public cloud. And Rackspace provides some really simple solutions for that, and I'm sure other companies as well, but that's the power of OpenStack. You can have it on both public and private cloud.
We had a great story. One of our customers related to us, a big biotech company. When they installed their OpenStack cloud, the Nebula system, it was a pretty lonely place. There wasn't a lot going on, but as people would discover the system, they would start doing things with it. This wasn't the model where you had to approve every server, approve every gigabyte of storage. This was a self-service model. I mean, really, at the end of the day, OpenStack is converting infrastructure, which you used to have to manually provision, where there was a human being and a business process and a chargeback code, into a quota, where hey, everybody gets a little bit, and then if you need more, you can provision more, and you can have a business process that chargeback. And he said, what happened here was OpenStack became a coral reef in our IT department, where it just started to attract more and more interesting things and projects and software, and it got really interesting and exciting very quickly because it was so agile and so easy for people to start using. And that's what happened with Amazon Web Services, and that's why it's growing so quickly. When new startups begin, they can go with a credit card and just start creating amazing software. And there isn't a lot of business process and overhead. It's very agile to get started.
I mean, I was sort of hoping Catherine was going to mention this, but I'm going to just quote you because you mentioned it. Catherine has talked often about the mandate of her project at Intel IT is to be able to go from idea to production in a single day. Right. And the history of Agile is always focused on this idea of reducing cycle time, not because going fast is a goal in and of itself, but because when you're trying to innovate, going fast is the only way that you improve the ability to innovate. And make mistakes faster and learn from them faster and then get to something that's useful. And I think OpenStack and Cloud Foundry in the enterprise serve both as this coral reef phenomenon where you don't know what people will do with it, which is what makes it powerful. That is the nature of innovation, is you're trying to get to something that you couldn't design and plan for. But also that the faster that folks can go through those cycles, the faster they can learn from each other. And really, I think that is the innovation engine, is partly about letting 1,000 flowers bloom, let everybody in the business do something unthinkable. have their own ideas, but also to do that as quickly as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. For us, agility is a constant theme, and we're hearing from our customers. No matter what enterprise you're in, you're probably being disrupted, and you know that, and you're scared. And for most people we talk to, it's not just about we want an API for automating our infrastructure. It's how do we fundamentally change our business to be able to react to the kind of market pressures we see. And the most interesting one I'm seeing lately, and we're hearing a lot about it these days, but there is not your traditional enterprise, but the telco market, right? The telco market are being massively disrupted. They know what's coming, and they know they need the ability to adapt and learn and get feedback from their customers. And if you think about a traditional telco data center, it's very, very different from your enterprise data center. There's a lot of black box proprietary solutions from NEPs, and basically the telcos are putting a mandate out there to their vendors to say, this can't continue, we need agile infrastructure, we need the ability to rapidly iterate on what we're offering to our customers, and that's really resulted in this kind of momentum in the industry and consensus in the industry about needing to adopt something called network function virtualization. And you're seeing this consensus around agile infrastructure using OpenStack, and the need for all kind of equipment vendors to supply their products to be able to run on kind of on cloud-like infrastructure for the telcos.
Very cool. So OpenStack sounds all rosy, and it's the solution to all of our problems. We did something fun with this panel. We used Twitter, and we put out a call for questions, and we got a couple interesting ones, and I'm going to read them verbatim. One is from King of PaaS, so Platform as a Service, and he tweeted this at Joshua. So he asks, why doesn't OpenStack fix its broken shit and stop encroaching in other spaces? I'll let you guys see.
Yeah. So, I think there's 2 points that we should address. The first one is this idea of is it broken? Which, other than perhaps the Gentoo freaks, and even really not them, nobody runs Linux from trunk, right? You don't run Linux from source. You don't run Android from source. You don't run Netscape from source. And so this idea that open source projects should be consumable as a product is never going to work, frankly. Certainly not at a large scale with a complex ecosystem, unless you yourself are part of that ecosystem. So I think Intel being the outlier here, they decided they wanted to be part of the open source community and work off of trunk. But for the vast majority of folks consuming OpenStack successfully, and I spend most of my time flying around the world and talking to folks who have done that, they're using a vendor's product, and they're trusting a vendor to say, at this date, we froze the code, we patched it, we hardened it, and we got it to something that's appropriate for your use case. And folks have been enormously successful with that model. I never run into folks who are saying, hey, I picked this vendor's OpenStack solution and it didn't work for me. The folks that are having trouble are saying, I downloaded raw open source from openstack.org and it didn't work. Well, that's not what you're supposed to do, frankly. That's a developer's ecosystem. This idea of encroachment, I think, the most powerful thing about the OpenStack community is probably also its biggest weakness, which is that it is a grassroots movement. It's 20,000 people who are doing whatever they want. And there's an amazing amount of innovation that comes out of that, and an amazing amount of noise and churn and prototypes that really don't go anywhere. And so again, without being part of that community, without being part of that ecosystem and reading the code yourself and going, oh, that's an interesting experiment, not something I would put in production, it's easy to look at this ecosystem as if it's one thing and say, I should be able to take all of that and run it. That's not the goal. OpenStack, as an experiment, the way the community was structured and the way the governance is set up, is as inclusive as possible. And that's one path to great innovation. Cloud Foundry, we've taken almost the opposite approach. We've made it way less inclusive so that we can provide a much more curated experience. I think there's pros and cons to both. So this idea of OpenStack encroaching, just ignore the noise. Run the parts that work, run the parts that you have a vendor who will support for you. From my standpoint, my mandate, why we originally started writing OpenStack, was so that we would have something that we could run a PaaS on top of. As soon as OpenStack got to the point where we could run Cloud Foundry on top of it reliably, I left to go work on Cloud Foundry. I think it's finished. So.
Yeah, I think a comparison to Linux is a great one. Just like for those of you that run Linux, you are running either Ubuntu or CentOS or RedHat release. Same thing with OpenStack. You can go to RedHat, Nebula, Piston, Rackspace, and download their installations, their releases, and it's all open source, so you can actually take a look at it. Most of the installations that I've seen, they are fully available for you to review. You can compare what's available, what's not. You can pay the companies to install it for you, or you can go to their websites and download it and run it, and it's, the same way you would download Ubuntu, you would download Rackspace or RDO OpenStack installation, and hopefully it all works. And sometimes things do break, but that's not the usual experience.
I mean, we have a number of entertainment companies, large movie studios, biotech companies, national labs, government agencies, all in production running our stuff, and it's very reliable. There's actually a system we have on a ship, which is off the coast of the Tasman Sea somewhere, and I guarantee flying somebody out on a helicopter to fix it if it broke would be very expensive for us. So we're pretty confident in the reliability of our product. We have a product. We sell a product. To Josh's point, OpenStack is a collection of open source projects. And Walmart was quoted recently talking about how they run all of their e-commerce infrastructure on OpenStack, 100,000 compute cores, which is many thousands of servers. They have a team of 1,000 people working on that. If this is core to your business, go do that. And for the NSA, for Intel, for a small number of companies, there will be an effort internally to master the entire stack, from the hardware all the way up to the software that makes you who you are. But also, there's a core set of capabilities which we are now defining in OpenStack. You cannot call your product OpenStack unless it passed tests and has reached a level of maturity on this matrix of core capabilities. And that core capabilities evolves with every OpenStack release. And it's very basic today. So I think as we start to see more innovation does not have to be in conflict with quality, stability, and maturity. And we've built the governance and the foundation within the OpenStack Foundation to ensure we can have both. So I disagree with that question.
And just to be clear, you can install OpenStack by hand. Just the same way you can compile a Linux kernel by hand.
Yeah, for me, there's a few different premises in that question that I wouldn't accept. Like one, for example, that it's broken. I think I'd be more like, it's early, and the analogy to Linux actually works very well there. If you think back to 1999, 2000, 2001, that kind of era of Linux, that's kind of where we're at with OpenStack as far as I'm concerned. But the more interesting one for me is, I've been doing open source for 15 years now, pretty much full time. I'm really interested in how open source communities work and how they're structured and the different ways it works. One of the premises in that question is this notion that we've got a group of developers, and if they're not working on fixing like the core of OpenStack, then they're off doing something kind of unimportant, and that they should be working on the core. When in fact what you've got really is this kind of non-hierarchical collaboration going on, right, where no one's directing all of these developers from them. They're self-directed, self-organizing kind of group of developers who are exploring different areas. Some of them are completely focused on making the core of OpenStack absolutely rock solid. They're completely dedicated to this. Others would never work on the core. That's just not where their expertise is. That's not where their interest. So they're exploring other areas. They're exploring kind of new services that you might run alongside OpenStack. They're exploring different ways to deploy OpenStack. They're exploring different ways to do CI of OpenStack. It's a very vibrant, mixed community with a lot of diverse interests, and it's that kind of community that you really, really get some interesting innovation from.
So it's hard to really add anything to what everybody else said, but I think that having all the individual projects going on, the community will work on the things that's most important to them, and the things that have the most value, the cream will rise to the crop, right? And then it'll be interesting to see how that gets proliferated through more of that product model. So, and you have to decide what's important to you, right, for your company, whether you're coming from it from a solution provider standpoint or from the enterprise standpoint. Where do you really want to contribute, and how deep do you want to go?
Very cool. So it's been said that OpenStack is becoming the 3M of computing. Do you want to just each talk about that and
It's
OpenStack
been said by me.
by you? And I'm sure
So maybe I should back that statement up. Sure.
So what did you mean?
I was quoting Catherine, and now Shawn's quoted me. We're very self-referential. This is the nature of cloud. We will just quote each other. I think everybody in this room, whether you realize it or not, probably used OpenStack in the last 24 hours. And I'll give a couple of examples of that. If you're in the US, and I know some of you traveled from the US, you go to a hospital and get x-rays taken. That's powered by OpenStack. There was a joke last night getting naked and watching Nickelodeon. I'm not going to give you context. If you missed the party, that's your loss. But if you're getting naked and watching Nickelodeon and you're doing that on Comcast, you're using OpenStack. As Chris mentioned, if you buy something from Walmart.com, that's OpenStack. It's been reasonably public that the NSA uses OpenStack at pretty massive scale, as do a lot of the intelligence community.
If you've been on your phone, OpenStack's used you.
OpenStack uses you. Yes. We actually managed to get Nathaniel Burton to neither confirm nor deny that NSA Prism is powered by OpenStack, which is as much confirmation as you'll ever get from them. So probably everything you do on a daily basis, OpenStack is touching it somewhere. And I think to sort of earlier speaker's point of, we've stopped talking about getting on the information superhighway. We've stopped talking about trying to go to the web. We're gradually going to stop talking about what's using OpenStack and just assume it's all using OpenStack.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of movies that have been post-processed on OpenStack Power Clouds.
So I actually still don't understand what you meant by 3M of the cloud.
So, you probably have 5 products on your person right now that are powered by 3M, that there are 3M components in. You never think of 3M as a company, right? You don't buy from them. And you don't even think of your company as buying from them. But everyone uses 3M in everything they do.
It means it's in there and you don't actually notice it. I guess, we understand that model at Intel.
Intel Inside. Intel Inside, powered by OpenStack inside Intel. It's turtles all the way down.
That's great. Yeah, I think once you start digging deep, you realize that it's kind of everywhere and you have no idea. I think one of the things you mentioned last night was Southeast Asia, radio station powering democracy, hopefully coming down the road.
The pirate radio of non-democratic countries in Southeast Asia that are trying to support local democracy movements, hiding from the regime. Yeah, that's OpenStack powered, which is a fun use case. And really this idea of automation taken to its logical extreme, we talked about how does this really change people's lives? Well, places where you can't have a human in a data center because they'll be beaten with a rubber hose, or because it's on a boat or in a nuclear reactor. Automation is the only way to address that. Right? So I think it's pretty powerful.
Cool. Quickly, list off your favorite OpenStack deployment.
For me, it's got to be CERN. They're one of the early adopters of OpenStack. They've been running it on RedHat for a long time. Great advocates of the project, very heavily involved, and just what they're doing is amazing and at an amazing scale.
I agree. CERN is like the perfect example of exploring the universe and running OpenStack at the same time. But we also have a big customer, I believe the name is Foundry, and they do a lot of media post-production, so all your favorite movies recently have been processed on public and private cloud, and it's amazing. You don't even think how much compute and storage goes into a single movie. It's lots and lots of compute power.
The thing about OpenStack is usually we find it in the really interesting places in a business. So you're not using OpenStack to power your ERP system or your accounting system or your old databases. You're running all that in VMware, and it'll happily run there for the next 25 years probably. What you're finding OpenStack doing is powering the mission of the organization. It's the thing that it's the Walmart website and e-commerce infrastructure. It's probably the Intel. It's the innovation. You find it at the core of innovation. It's the coral reef. So one of the things that we're seeing is a really neat project at NASA where we started the project there. So having it come full circle back where they can now buy OpenStack from a whole bunch of different competitive vendors. So for the first time, the government actually has choice. They're using it to power the Jupiter Europa mission. And what's exciting about that is it's a 10-year mission. So they're able to bet on OpenStack because it'll be there in 10 years. And so it's a bet as much on the future of OpenStack as the idea of the benefit of not being embedded on a particular piece of hardware. So the last mission to Mars, they were still running code on an old Sun Spark station. And so by building this on OpenStack, we can now upgrade the servers and the infrastructure underneath the OpenStack abstractions, probably 3 or 4 times in that 10-year period of time. And the software is all running on OpenStack. And I think that's a great story.
Okay, so for me, well, I'm definitely, as an enterprise, I have CERN envy. That's a whole other story. But of course, my favorite deployment is our own. And we get asked a lot, so what are you using OpenStack for? What's actually running there? And, tell me a little bit about what are the different apps that run there. And I think our most famous example of what's running on our infrastructure as a service for OpenStack has been Intel's Make It Wearable campaign. So, Intel has been doing a lot of work in wearable devices, and you may have seen commercials around, some of the new sensing technologies and things like that. And the Make It Wearable campaign was something that we ran to promote innovation and show how you can use wearable technologies to create real products out of them. And I don't know, did you see the winner of the Make It Wearable campaign was one of those selfie flying devices?
Oh, the Nixie, where you use a drone and you put on your wrist and
did you see that?
Pictures of you.
So that was the winner of the Make It Wearable contest, and that application ran in our cloud on OpenStack.
Fascinating.
Yeah, so it's kind of cool.
I'm a huge Wozniak fan, right? So I started programming when I was 6 on an Apple, and I always credited my ability to learn to write software because I was lucky enough to be born in this era when you didn't have to understand hardware to write software, which really was born with the Apple computer with Steve Wozniak. Before that era, you really had to understand hardware, and I'm not a hardware guy. Like, I struggle with sort of basic circuits, and my soldering is not very good. So I never would have been able to be a software guy in a previous era. And I have 2 daughters, and I really want them to be able to have the same experience of software without thinking about hardware. And in the last 10 years, that got really hard, increasingly difficult, because as our applications went from being something that could fit on a single server to being larger and larger and had to scale, where they had to span servers, and all of a sudden they had to be distributed systems, and they had to be complicated. They had to understand the network, and they had to understand storage performance, and all of a sudden you had to understand all of this stuff about hardware to write software again. And I found myself really miserable having to understand, how to operate the operating system. And even at NASA, I remember Chris probably remembers me bitching all the time about needing to buy and configure hardware and dealing with hardware vendors on procurement. And I was like, I don't care. I don't want to care. I don't want to have to care. And so, the exciting thing about me for both OpenStack and Cloud Foundry is the not caring, of getting back to writing software without having to care about the underlying hardware. So any OpenStack cloud that's running with that in mind, with those developers in mind, which I think yours at Intel is a great example of that. Warner Media Group is a great example of that. There's a huge football brand that runs a big event that ends with bull.
Like soccer?
No. American football. I'm not supposed to say the brand name. They're a customer of ours. We built this really cool big data app for them around that bowl event with iBeacons. where we tracked everybody in the stadium and where they were going during the game and where they were buying food and where they were sitting and how their digital experience could be tied to their physical experience. Which I think is, when we talk about live streaming and what is that actually, where does that hit the road for a big brand? And that, that's powered by these open source cloud technologies. That to me is the most exciting project, is where you can have an idea and somebody can write software without having to think about the infrastructure.
Right. I think though, so where you need specialized hardware for your app, we still have some challenges there. So, there's still work to do. There's still some maturing that needs to happen there.
Sorry,
today,
we're going to wrap her up, but
okay.
I'm going to hand it over to Alistair, but before we do that, you guys are already doing epic things, so I think we should do an epic selfie, epic one for Interzone. So, are you guys up for that?
All right. Let's do it. We got to turn our backs to the audience, right, so we can have them in the back. You're going to be in the selfie with us. It'll work. It's good.
I'm trying not to fall off the stage.
Everybody? Awesome. Cool. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
And it's all yours.